But to express oneself honestly, not lying to oneself, that, my friend, is very hard to do. You better believe it, man. I mean, it's always the pigtail and bouncing around chop, you know, with the eyes slant and all that. That in the United States, I think something about the Oriental, the true Oriental should be shown.
He's attempting to get in, but you don't actually hear his voice.
Some of the most underrepresented and stereotyped characters in cinema.
Feelings are a symbol of eternity.
Raj, I'm a Bollywood producer.
Do we have Asian privilege in America?
She told me that she didn't find Asian guys attractive. I was like, oh my God, like, what's wrong with being an Asian guy? Like, there was a ton of self-loathing and self-hatred. That's when I felt like I didn't want to live.
Kind of have a no dating Asian sort of policy. You kind of look a bit like my brother.
Sorry, I have a no dating Asian policy as well. I'm not into Asian guys.
Japanese, little Z.
Why not?
Confidence?
I can be anything without any knowledge of it. Show up to the white.
Because real racism is quiet. It's subtle. People look around first.
Asian guys are
Very good at that.
Yeah.
Not hung.
Nice doesn't get you anywhere.
Pussy, because that's all they got.
Do you like Asian men? No. Thank you.
It's the same shit that we've heard for the last 50 years. Like, miss me with that. It's so boring at this point.
Think of yourself Chinese, or do you ever think of yourself as North American?
You know what I want to think of myself? As a human being.
You're probably thinking, does everything have to be about race? No, not at all. In fact, I've tried to live most of my life without my ethnicity dictating all of my behaviors and how people perceive me. I rarely ever try to bring my ethnicity or race in conversations ever. I've never really even made a video that mentions my ethnicity. I never hated being my race. I never hated being Asian. I just simply wanted to be viewed as human first. Even though I never personally hated my race, there are many others who hate their ethnicity. With that being said, if you can't relate to anything that I'm saying, then you probably live in a social standing that allows you not to see it, and you probably benefit from that. In fact, if none of this pertains to you, you probably don't even have to watch this video. And I just implore everyone watching to at least keep an open mind. Whether you are a minority or you're not, I'm sure there are many things within this video that are at least relatable. And with that being said, as much as I've tried to live my life without acknowledging my race, a lot of other people do. What's for dinner? Cat or dog? You're an artist, shouldn't you be like good at math or something? Huh, look at this small dick anime character over here. Oh, you're from China? Do you know Kung Fu? And of course, when I was dating this girl, her father walks into the room and the first thing he says to me, how does an Asian guy get a name like Pierre? Generally, I prefer maybe hello, nice to meet you. And all I did was literally exist. After being thrown all of these comments, you would think the average person would just at least get angry and say something about it. However, something funny happens. We, Asian people, generally laugh with the joke, while they're laughing at us. Not only will we laugh with them, we will often make the jokes ourselves at ourselves as a preemptive defense before anyone else makes the joke at us, which then becomes unspoken permission for these jokes to continue. The same girl I dated with a charming dad would often make these so-called Asian jokes at me, and after the first 3 or 4 times, I thought it was okay, that's cute, funny. And then I would say after the 100th and 24th time, it got to a point where it's like, okay, I had to speak up. And I politely said, those jokes you're making, they're starting to make me fairly uncomfortable, so maybe we can just, hold back on those a little bit. And
Getting stuck sucks. At host
Of course, she shamed me for it. Pierre, why are you being so sensitive? They're just a joke. Like, you're really gonna get angry over that? Like, seriously? About a week later, we went to a party together, and there was one other Asian guy at this party. So here we are sitting with a group of 10 people, and out of nowhere, she decides to ask him, do you get offended when people make Asian jokes at you? He, being put on the spot in front of all these people, looks down, fairly caught off guard, and he says, no, not really. And then she goes, well, he does, and pointed at her boyfriend at the time, which was me. Now all of the eyes are staring at me, waiting for my response. So I am there having to not only deal with her passive-aggressive racism, but I'm also being portrayed as a sensitive little boy who can't take a joke, who is also simultaneously somehow villainized. And yes, I can take a joke, only if they're funny. Not once did she ever laugh after any of these jokes, let alone anyone else around her. Jokes primarily depend on context and where they come from. These jokes that are thrown at me and other Asians and other minorities, they don't exactly come from the most understanding place. And when they do come from that good place, they're actually funny. And now, all of this raises the question, where did these stereotypes even come from, and why do people believe them? In the contemporary world, I think the biggest factor in the influence is mainstream media. Art, music, movies, news, politics, and all the stuff that ties in with that. And how are Asians represented in the media? They're either nerdy, passive, hyper-intelligent, asexual, effeminate, emasculated, awkward, martial artists, sidekicks, and overall, we're just kind of portrayed as caricatures. In fact, can you name a famous Asian icon off the top of your head? Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan. And if you could name any of the others, please try asking any of your friends or your family members if they recognize that name. So it
Alrighty, we're gonna get started. I joined on Zoom so that I could make sure that everything was working, but no one needs to hear me echo. Let me add my AirPods ahead of time so that I'm not doing this at the last second, like always, when I realize that my audio is crappy. Okay, Michael, AirPods, boom shakalaka. Yes, awesome. Okay, sorry about that. So let me share. Yeah, there we go. All right, so to open up, oh, I missed the chat. Yes, Jubilee is great. So this lovely man, as people have already noted, is wonderful Pierre. I'm going to move y'all to the side so I can see. There we go. He's great. I love him. I will love his videos. And he also did this just really awesome, super long video essay, basically deconstructing myths and issues surrounding Asian racism. So we're going to get in that as a whole. But today's main topic is loading. Appropriation, xenophobia, and political correctness in South Korea. Yay, woo. It's going to be an interesting day, but more than anything, we got to start off with a disclaimer. So I wrote this down to make sure that I didn't miss anything. But more than anything, before we get into the topic, I wanted to outline that today is about starting a conversation. Whenever we're tasked with explaining what KCC is and our mission as an organization, I by and large mainly push that we are in the business of education. So more than anything, there is a misconception that oftentimes when people discuss Korean culture, it for some reason hyperfixates on K-pop or K-drama, or is always revolving around the entertainment aspect. But to be clear, we aren't a K-pop club. We're not a K-pop organization. Although plenty of our members absolutely love it, we also have international students and language majors who come to us to gain a more in-depth perspective on Korean culture. And we have a duty to you guys to do the best work that we can. So I think we've done a good job of that and always making sure that everything is fun, but that doesn't go away just because we're covering more touchy topics, quote unquote. So just let you guys know, it's going to be a little bit more in-depth this week, obviously, but that's not being said that it's going to be like controversial subjects, because we live in America. So Pierre's little video is right here. I try to also, I really like opening up meetings with either a video that has to do with the topic or just something relative to get people's like brain juices going. But that being said, I wanted to step aside for a moment and highlight a few wonderful resources in regards to the advocacy of Asian American rights and protections for those who may not know or may not be updated with the news, especially after the week that we just had here in Texas. There's been a massive increase in racially targeted hate crimes against Asian Americans, especially the elderly. And with the Black Lives Matter movement that happened at its apex last summer, we didn't really have the opportunity to sit down and speak with you guys and ask you directly how you felt. And with the increasing targeting of Black Americans by the police and general hate crimes, we weren't really able to dive in with you guys. But we did, of course, put out a statement and resources. So we did want to take this opportunity I'll be sure to give Jess these links for the email next week, but these are some great organizations right here that have done so much more work and so much more, I was like, what is that? Cacao. Have done so much more back in work for decades on really helping to progress Asian American rights in this country. And I didn't personally want to open up this huge bag because it's so much depth. And as someone who is, of course, not Asian American, if you cannot tell, it's not my position to speak on. But as an organization as a whole, as I tell other presidents for Asian Student Association, for Asian student orgs, like the VSA president, the FSA president, we are, so to speak, somewhat of an allyship of an organization. So even though the majority of our membership, majority of our officers are not Asian, we are here to, of course, promote inclusiveness and to really do our best to educate and advocate for Asian American rights. So these are some great resources. Obviously, I hyperlinked them, which I didn't realize. It's like if I click on it, I can see it. And I'll show you guys just an example in a second. But again, I'll be sure to get these links to Jess so that you guys have an opportunity to donate if you can, to learn more, heck, to even volunteer for some of these organizations that have chapters in Texas. So yes, this is a great, the Asian Law Caucus has done a lot in the past with helping to advocate for housing restrictions that have been placed on Asian Americans, advocate against that. And there's just been a lot of progress that they've been able to complete. So that being said, moving right on forward, wanted you guys to know that that is definitely resources that we will promote and get to you guys. Loading forward. Oh, this sexy dorm Wi-Fi has not gotten any better. Okay. And then last little part of our baby disclaimer before we hop into the juicy stuff, to get back into it. None of us are Korean. Like I said, none of us are Asian. If you can't, well, Dundee, but none of us are Korean, if you can't tell. So because of this, there is always going to be an unconscious bias, even in the facts that we're going to present from our research that we've done for this presentation, and the firsthand testimonies that we'll present. In really keeping this balance, I will be speaking on the perspective, of course, as Michael Bain, a Black woman. So it's important to recognize how our individual and ethnic experiences affect the way that we interpret things. I may look at a situation of cultural appropriation differently than someone else because of my own lived experiences. That goes the same way for Americans learning about Korea, specifically language students such as like K-pop stans, Hangul learners, yada, 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 who are by and large made up of a more liberal demographic, may perceive conservative Korean customs differently than other traditional societies. So long story short, I really encourage you all to share your truth, but to also keep that same energy, because just because you don't agree with it doesn't mean it itself isn't valid. So that being said, we also don't talk over anyone, and there may be a whole lot of gray here, but it's also just as much black and white and right and wrong. So a lot of words, a lot of disclaimers. Pretty much I did want to set the stage because cultural appropriation can be somewhat subjective, but we'll be sure to give you guys all the resources so we have a great foundation. Let's get into it. First up, we're going to be talking about xenophobia. So a brief look at Korea's external history and foreign diplomacy.
Hello, As your resident history major, I did want to talk about kind of the background of Korea with different countries. I will give a little trigger warning in this specific slide. There will be mentions of sex slaves and sexual assault. Yes. So the big ticket item and kind of why South Korea is what it is today is because of the Japanese occupation from 1910 to 1945. Basically, if you do not know, historically, Japan is an extremely militaristic country, and I still got the K-pop companies in my head from the from the podcast, but they are very established militaristically. For example, there was a time period where they were just completely battling with China, and then Korea, and then Russia. Like, the only country that had beat them in that period of time was China. They completely demolished Russia, that giant, and it was like a navy battle too. And then obviously they did take control of Korea. They're a very powerful country. And so during the Japanese occupation of South Korea, we have what is called comfort women, where they essentially would have the women in Korea being used as sex slaves for the Japanese soldiers. So going off on that, if you have ever called an idol your comfort person, I would say stop doing that because of the trauma that is associated with. Yeah, just a little touch on that. During this occupation, Korea couldn't print their own press. Everything was very dominated by Japan, and they attempt to erase their language, culture, and history, and that's why Korea is so not nationalistic, because that has a lot of negative connotations, but they're a very proud country in who they are, and they are xenophobic because of the fact that they had this attempt to erase their whole language, culture, and history. And so that's why they're more closed off with other countries wanting to come in with idols and things like that. And then recently, Japan restricted their exports to South Korea, specifically with semiconductor metals specifically. And they kind of did this as a retaliation of South Korea wanting Japan to pay reparations for the internment, or not the internment, but the occupation, and all of the other things that happened during Japan's occupation. So that's Japan. And then with other countries, I'll kind of start out with Thailand. They don't really have a lot of negative history with South Korea. As I said, that during the Korean War, they were in support of South Korea. They were the second country to send troops right after the US, who was obviously a very big ally of South Korea during the Korean War. So Thailand has some pretty good history with South Korea. However, that does not mean that they treat Thai individuals who live in Korea good. They still are a very xenophobic country due to the history that they have with the Japanese occupation. And then for Taiwan, Seoul recognized the People's Republic of China, which, if you don't know specifically what that is, basically the People's Republic of China is modern day communist China. And the Republic of China is what's based in Taiwan. So after Seoul recognized the PRC of being the overall nation of China, Taiwan immediately terminated all flights between Seoul and Taipei. So yeah, that's a little bit on them. And then for China, in 2016, there were some accusations of Chinese fishermen illegally fishing on the South Korean coastline. They talked with China and they're like, that's not us, but we'll stop. And then they didn't. So South Korea opened fire on Chinese fishing ships. No one died. However, that's still crazy. And then there is THAAD, which stands for Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. And what that is the US and South Korea kind of joined forces to put these protect, like have missiles and stuff like that on South Korea to protect against North Korea. However, China opposed it because they thought that it was another way for the US to control them, and thought that South Korea was on US side for like, oh, anti-China and things like that. And so that's what really started. This was in late 2016, and that's what really started the Hallyu ban in China. They, like, Chinese people essentially boycotted a lot of Korean things. One big place that they took a hit on was their Hyundai car industry. They really took a tank in China. No Chinese people were buying Hyundai cars from Korea because of this. And then we have the Hallyu band, where that's where we have members from EXO, Chris, Tao, Luhan. They left. Different members in other, like different Chinese members in other groups, they could not promote. Recently though, that has been lifted thanks to G-Dragon. And I can't remember the other person that helped out with him, but they were in China a lot trying to make these relations better. So yeah, that was a brief, somewhat history of South Korea with all of these other countries.
And then, so now moving on to foreigners in South Korea, and this is more geared towards people who are living in South Korea right now, and maybe they're studying abroad or they're teaching abroad. And this is just some things that I found from different little like forums and stuff and blogs online and everything. But overall, what I gathered is that there are many wonderful things about living in South Korea. However, like with any place, there's some very different things and different downsides that come along with moving somewhere new. For one, even though you may become fluent in Korean and learn the customs, you may still be seen as a foreigner in South Korea. Since they're largely a homogeneous society, they are not necessarily structured in a way for foreigners to easily assimilate. However, this also means that you may not be held to the same sort of expectations in terms of like maybe having working super long hours at work or working constantly at school as much, because you're still seen as a foreigner, even if you've been there for a while. And then kind of continuing on with this is some things I noticed was that most foreigners tend to get attention regarding their skin color, facial features, or being asked where they're from, even after being there for many years. And the attention may vary too, depending on race. Typically, people with more Western features may receive more positive attention, and others, especially those from East Asian countries, may be treated negative attention. Unfortunately, these are just kind of graphs showing the different ethnic composition between South Korea and then a more diverse place like America. So with South Korea, 97.7% of the population is Korean, with the next majority being 2%, which is Japanese. So that's a pretty big difference compared to America, where it's 64% white, and then the next 12% Black, 16% Hispanic, and then about 5% Asian. So just kind of like the difference between the different populations living there. And then also South Korea is a much smaller country also compared to America. And then for the next slide, I actually interviewed my friend and she lived in South Korea for 2 years. Her dad's in the military. And so my friend Alexa, she lived there for her freshman and sophomore year in high school. And so I did a little interview with her and just asked her a couple questions to see what her experience was like whenever she lived there for those 2 years. And so the first question I asked her was what her overall experience was living in Korea. And she said that she absolutely loved her experience. She said she loved the culture and everyone she encountered there was so nice and respectful. She said that she felt there was a great sense of community and that everyone was very honorable. She said honor is such an evident part of Korean culture and family life. Being a high school student there was such a great experience because of the freedom and how safe it was. Her and her friends felt safe and at peace while they were in public, and that is something that separated her experience from what it was like in America. For example, they would be on the subways as 16-year-olds past midnight and wouldn't even think twice about it. She said that there were also so many fun things to do, and she remembers going to a lot of street fairs and festivals, such as the Cherry Blossom Festival, Lantern Festival, and Korean New Year celebrations. And then the second question I asked her was, did you feel you were able to assimilate, or did you feel like a foreigner most of the time you were there? And she said it was definitely something that took some time, and she definitely felt overwhelmed when she first moved there, especially since she had never been out of the country before living in South Korea. However, going back to that sense of community, respect, and safety that was evident, she felt much more comfortable. Although she looked like a foreigner on the outside, after a while, she says that she didn't feel like one on the inside. She loved the food, the people, and she felt immersed in the culture. And she said at first it was definitely different going to places that were more heavy in traditional culture. For example, Insadong was definitely an area that was more traditional and culture was a lot more evident. On the contrary, Myeongdong is an example of a very up and coming and more westernized area. And after getting used to the differences and different vibes of these areas, she said things came full circle and she was completely comfortable and grew to adore her experience more. And asked what her most negative experience was. And she said that her most negative experience actually happened the very first week that she lived there. She and her family did a lot of traveling and exploring, and a lot of the exploring at first was in less westernized areas. And so she was feeling uncomfortable and overwhelmed, and she had a little mini breakdown in a restaurant bathroom, which she said was very awkward. But and then she said her oh my gosh, I switched the questions. I'm so sorry. That was the most negative experience. Then the most positive experience was everything, she says. She loved Korea, and she said it was a really happy place, and the hustle and bustle of the city kept everything so fun. She loved the country as a whole, its people and its food, and she will forever hold such a special place in her heart and her memories. So yeah, sorry, switched up the questions there.
That is so good to hear. It's just so positive. I appreciate that. So now we're going to move into our section with foreign/biracial idols. Primarily, we wanted to have this specific section. You may be like, why are we doing specifically idols? But we wanted to tackle, number one, the domestic perception of the increased globalization that is happening in Korea. And that is primarily because of activities like K-dramas, e-gaming, K-beauty, K-pop, and the effect that that has had on the increased diversity with a particularly homogenous country. So with the more that they grow, the more that it will be interesting to see how a country where, if I live somewhere where everyone was Black, well, Africa, and I look outside and everyone's like my same skin tone and we may have the same ideals, this new introduction of foreign cultures and foreign people I may have a different perspective on that. So idols are a really great sort of subject to look at internal history and race relations, which is what we'll be covering now.
Okay. Hello. These are Jess's slides, and so I'm going to read them since she cannot be here. Do excuse me if I keep looking down. She left some notes for me at the bottom of the slides, so I'm gonna look down every once in a while to make sure that I pass on this information properly. Do we want to watch this this video right now, or do we want to save it for the end? I'm not sure how much of a time should we watch it now.
Let's see. I don't know how long.
Yeah,
ったことはありますか？いや、ないです。
She might have timed it, so we'll just watch until like maybe a minute or so.
Okay.
ないです。
楽しかったです。また行きたいなって思います。
なるほど。
あります。買い物も日本にない感覚がありますので。
行ったことはないけどどんな印象ですかね。
アイドルがすごい TWICE とか可愛い。可愛いメイクとか眉毛が濃い可愛い人ばっかって感じ、
今の若い方はでも韓国という国は好きなんじゃないですかね、韓国の人も好きだと思うし、韓国のやっぱり、歌手であったり、そういった方反対に日本に今来たりしてっていうのはあるので、ただでも、知らない。
韓国人への印象はどうですか？
韓国人は韓国人の友達もいるし、あと在日の人も、友達もいるので、別にそれほど、拒否反応はないですね。
友達とかその先ほどの会社の同期とかがいて、やっぱり日本人よりはタフだなって思います。
具体的な友達いませんけど、個人的に親しくなった人なんかは結構そんなに悪い人はいないと思うんですけども、国同士になるとどうしてもね、
個人個人のレベルでいうとね。
Okay, that's a good place to like cap off at, because I see that Jess is quoted like, but young people wouldn't know the history, and we've kind of gotten into that history. So I'm gonna let Tessa give us more of the deets.
I real fast, I want to point out, we don't get very open-minded older people like that, which that was really nice to see. Like, I've never heard an older person be that open-minded. That was beautiful. Okay, anyways, so, are we on the, okay, cool. I just have to make sure because I'm trying to go in between slides and I realize y'all don't see what I'm seeing. So as of October 2019, more than 45,000 residents lived in Seoul, Korea. Compared to previous years, the number of Japanese residents increased by over 6,000 residents. And she also put a side note. She said that she could not find a chart for this, but according to Business Korea magazine, the number of foreigners living in Seoul, Korea topped 2 million in the year 2019, which is insane. And so next slide. She said that she has a friend who is African American and Japanese. And so she wanted to ask what his experience was like visiting South Korea. She did also ask, please stop audio at 2 minutes and 35 seconds.
So while I was in South Korea, the people in South Korea was very nice. They treated me very well, and they were respectful of me. I had an older lady coming to me and asked me what was my nationality, because she saw me as an Asian. So I respectfully answered her question, saying I was Japanese and African American, and she was very surprised. We had a conversation. The gift I was buying at that time, which was a family gift, a gift to my family from Korea. There was a young boy, probably not even 12. He came up to me and said he wanted to take a picture with me. Although I was in denial, or I denied his request, I denied his request because I wasn't really a fan of taking a picture with someone else. So he said, you're very beautiful. Although I was off guard, I was not expecting from him saying I was beautiful. The only time I might have, I wouldn't say mistreated, but I guess like whenever I found a debit or credit card at the map desk in the South Korea airline, I picked up the card and went to the information desk where someone was working there, and I wanted to make sure no one was taken from that credit card. And so while I was in line, or when I had a chance to be the next, when I was next after, when I was next, when I was walking up to the desk, an older lady cuts in front of me, saying she wanted to cut in front of me. Although I kind of knew that would happen, but for the person who was working there, she said, "I'm sorry, but this person was here first." So I think that's the only time I might have that little bit incident.
Okay, I set a timer, so I think that was accurate, but let me know if Jess is like, no, there should have been more. We can sit it out later.
Okay. I wasn't too sure because I didn't get to listen to the audio before either, and I was ready to learn more about the credit card incident. That was interesting. Okay. So anyways, the Japanese idols and relations for this video, if we would like to watch it, she said that she can send the link in Kakao, but I'm not sure if it's connected, but if we have time, I guess. But she said, we all know that training life in Korea can be long and brutal, but it's especially hard for Japanese trainees. Training in Japan is not as strict in South Korea. Japanese trainees do not have the proper training in Korea since they only focus on putting on a performance that does not involve hard choreography. Their groups can be seen more like cosplay. Produce 48 announced that they will be combining Korean trainee and AKB48 members. This created a lot of backlash for the Korean public, but of the sensitive history they have with Japan. Okay, I'm sorry. During the show, it demonstrated that differences that the difference of training between the trainees in Korea and Japan. Oh, I kind of actually would like to see that. I think it's pronounced Izone. Is it Izone or Izone? Because I've heard people say it both ways.
I think it's eyes one.
It's
Eyes one.
Eyes one? Okay, thank you. Before their debut, a petition was put in place by the Korean public to ban IZ*ONE from performing on KBS and music show. The reason was because the group was combined with AKB48 members, which AKB48 is a well-known group that actively supports the Japanese right wing and its activities. Approximately 12,000 people had signed the petition. Most popular Japanese idols are Yuta from NCT, Sana, Momo, and Mina from TWICE, Nako and Sakura, and Hitomi from IZ*ONE. And then let me check the notes. Okay, she does have one note. She said, most recently, South Korea entertainment companies have been branching out more and debuting groups in Japan. JYP has debuted Niziu, which I know I've seen the name before. Niziu, an all Japanese girl group. Big Hit Entertainment is also debuting a boy group in Japan very soon.
And I'll play this for like a minute or so, just because I've seen this video, because I love Misa, a good video essay. There's a longer version, but we'll probably play a minute so you guys can see, because this girl goes through some mess.
나 지금 손만 살짝 올리고 있는 거야. 호흡해, 옳지, 호흡해. 내려가, 내려가자. 야, 하고 있어요. 빨리 빼봐. 빼줘. 진짜 아파 정말. 원, 투, 쓰리, 포, 파이, 식스, 세븐, 넷, 웬 아니지? 이렇게 돌려야지. 다시 해봐. 예를 들어 수능이죠, 수능. 연습을 진짜 백날 하는 친구가 있는데 왜 이렇게 또 안 되지? 아웃되는 친구들이 한 명, 두 명 정도는 있어야 얘네들이 자극을 받고 더 노력을 하지 않을까 싶기도 합니다. 얘한테 몇 번 얘기하니? 애들 다 알잖아. 몇 번 얘기했어?
韓国の練習生ほど厳しいものはないんじゃないかなって私は思いますね.
와, 나도 생긴 것도 좀 생기고 노래도 어느 정도 좀 잘하고 춤도 어느 정도 잘 추는데 나도 가수나 해볼까? 라고 생각하시는 분들이 대부분일 거예요. 이 꿈을 꾸지 말아라 이건 아니에요. 그래도 한 번 더 생각을 해봐야 된다.
それがまあなんとか合格につながって今の会社に合格したんですけどもう本当に奇跡だと思いました.
초딩 수준이야. 우리가 원하는 완벽한 부분은 아니지만 대표님이 왜 이 친구를 연습생으로 영입했는지 이유는 알겠지. 정확해요.
朝何も食べない。昼サラダちょっと食べて夜食べないみたいな生活をしてて、多分1日に300キロカロリーぐらいしか取ってなかった時本当に力が出なくて貧血は起こすし、いや本当に死ぬかと思いましたね。いや本当に死を覚悟しました。なんかもう
Yeah, her life sucks, but be sure to like look this up because it gets wild, man. But I don't want to take up more time. All right, continuing on. Boop, boop.
And so now again with the Japanese idols and their relations, so there's obviously NCT Yuta. Yuta received backlash from Korea netizens back in 2020 when he revealed live on social media that he was close friends with YouTuber Ri-kun, which is a popular Japanese YouTuber also known as Lee-gun. He's a YouTuber who has been accused to have hurt Korean sentiments. The YouTuber has reportedly made controversial posts on social media which are offensive to Koreans. Reportedly, Ri-kun YouTuber has also made inappropriate comments on women and has openly produced content which is anti-Korea. Reportedly, he has mentioned names of idols Suli and Jonghyun as clickbaits on his post videos. So that's awful. This statement hurt many fans and they demanded an apology. However, the live stream has been taken down and deleted, but Yuta has still yet to give a statement of apology to the public. and then twice Sana. Sana has received backlash from an Instagram post she had posted in 2019. The caption reads, "As someone born in the Hesi era, I am sad that it is coming to an end. However, Hesi, you've worked hard. It's the beginning of the I'm butchering these so bad. I'm terribly, terribly sorry. Reiwa era. So I'm going to face the beginning and complete the last day of Hesi neatly. This has angered many Koreans as the claim she has been insensitive to Koreans as Japan never apologized for their occupation of the country." Honey Popcorn, formerly a 3 Japanese member K-pop group, was in hot water with the Korean government because of their involvement of making Japanese adult videos for money. Okay, sweetheart, not right now. Shh. Sorry, Jess's cat is talking to me. she had something to say as well. And so then next slide for more on Japanese idols and their relations. So there is still a conflict between Japan and South Korea. Japan government or Japanese government has decided to cut off trading from South Korea. The fight between the Liancourt Rocks, which is a group of small, I've tried to say this word, islets in the sea, not right now, in the Sea of Japan. Both countries claim sovereignty over the island. Koreans refer to them as Dokdo, and Japanese refer to it as Tekishima. Shh. I'm so sorry. Jess's cat she is really speaking today. And so for the next slide, it is a poll for which Japanese idol caught your eye, and I'm going to send that link out in the main chat so that all of you guys can click on it and then vote. So hopefully that comes to you. Do not. So hopefully, let me know if it does not work though. Hopefully it should. I hope I got it.
It's working on my end.
Okay, good. I think it'll ask you for like agreeing for something. You can hit skip and it'll still let you go through if you don't want to agree or anything. But yes, okay. It should be live. I hope so. I'm not sure. I voted, but it's not popping up. Why is that?
Also, wait, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
My internet's being really bad. It might boot me. But also that video on that Japanese idol, that company is really bold for having standards like that, because their last girl group went viral because they're like, hey, we need to sell 1,000 copies of our CD or we're going to disband. So once again, just like our podcast, me and Monty made a tier called Poor But Entitled. I think that company is Poor But Entitled.
I had the same problem when I think we tried to do the poll the first time in the first podcast episode. There's some mess. You have to like make sure that it's live and then make sure that answers are also live.
Okay, because it was, I mean, when she called me into her room last night, she's like, hey, check and see if this works. I could vote like 7 million times.
Mm-hmm.
And it was going great. And now I'm not seeing anything. Darn it. Okay. That's okay.
Okay.
Now we know that.
We tried our best.
Okay, and then I think, yes, all right, I think it is Dundee's turn to take the wheel.
Chinese idols. Here, you know what? Go over there. Thank you, sir. So Chinese idols. In total, there are around 50 idols that are Chinese that have debuted in Korea and have either like left back to China, or, which I will get into, or like are still in Korea. But in total, this is statistics from 2018. There's a little over 1 million of Chinese living in South Korea currently. But a little bit of background with Chinese idols. The very first Chinese idol to debut in South Korea was a member of Super Junior known as Hanjin. I think that's the way it's pronounced. I apologize. Way back in like 2009. And since then, it kind of became like a normal thing in K-pop to see like a Chinese idol. And so companies would go and scout and hold more auditions in places like China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and many others, training some of the most popular idols in K-pop history. So some of like the top names include like Jackson from GOT7, Sue from Twice and Lucas from NCT, and all of them have Chinese backgrounds. Even with SM, and I think JYP Entertainment is making more significant efforts in Chinese markets or debuting in all Chinese groups to promote in China. The founder of SM, even like in a recent interview, like he like dreams that Korea would be the leading content producing company in the world, and that China needs to open their doors to Korea and create like kind of like an Asian Hollywood. But the idea won't necessarily work without China, which is going to be hard because like I forgot who mentioned it before, like a lot of Chinese idols are leaving Korea where they started their music careers and are heading back home, where they will continue the music and not in South Korea. And so like the biggest ones that come to mind are like the Chinese members of EXO, and like where like a huge like lawsuit broke out, but like I'll get into that. But first, we all know like how companies like treat their idols like in general. Some of them are great, but like we've been doing, we want to fix it. But for Chinese idols and just foreign idols in general, they are treated like even more differently by their companies. There are many issues revolving around it, including being paid less compared to the Korean group members, fan opinions, things they say, like they give like serious backlash for it, etc. So just focusing on China for this moment, Korean labels have pushed hard to draw talent out of China, resulting in recruiting Chinese idol trainees towards the end of the last decade, hoping that them and Mandarin language songs would help win over China's large consumer class. And so it was pioneered by SM, who you all know is the largest and most infamously exploitive agency, which had debuted a Mandarin-speaking subunit of Super Junior. I believe, the first generation of Chinese stars in Seoul came to an idol talent system that's kind of treated almost like the Olympics. Like they train so hard for it. It's crazy, with like all the training and being ruthless. And once signed on and in a group is like when all the exploitation starts and financial and legal disputes are common. It's like for like only after a year being a part of Super Junior, Hangjin sued SM for unfair distribution of profits and left the group, which by the way, he was like, oh yeah, I mentioned like he was like the first Chinese member to like debut in K-pop. There's also the issue I saw, I'm not really sure it was like completely true, but there's not really information on it because it was something that was kind of like, let's not talk about it. But he wasn't allowed to perform on any shows with the group from what I saw. And like if he did, he had to wear a mask because like the biggest reason I found was like visa issues, and SM didn't know how to file the right paperwork at the time for him to perform on specific shows because he was Chinese. But yeah, the biggest example has been SM's 12-member group EXO, which had an insane popularity all over Asia and blew up, opened the door for idol culture in China thanks to the Mandarin subunit that sang Mandarin version of their songs. But it was short-lived because 3 of the members were citing unfair treatment and profit distribution and like left in like 2014, 2015. And then a legal battle followed, only reaching settlements like 2016. But the exact details were never disclosed because SM like has maintained management rights until the end of the artist's contracts and remains entitled to a percentage of whatever they make in China. So I think it's like 10%. I think so, yeah. So whatever they make in China, the company still gains like 10% of it. The whole shebang with EXO trod a shift in the way Korean entertainment agencies handle the Chinese idols. So upon returning to China, the ex-members enjoyed a staggering windfall as hometown heroes in their newly K-pop crazy country. And although SM was still, like I said, SM was still making like 10% of their earnings in China, they saw an opportunity to make even more without legal or public relation headaches with solo studios in China for other idols like Lay and Victoria from FX. But brain like reversed that. So they started to appear less frequently with their group and started pursuing solo careers in China. In 2017, JYP followed suit, setting up a Chinese studio for Jackson from GOT7. And especially after the TAAD sanctions in 2016, it was important for the Hallyu link sectors to shrink. And so like they were like, give us back. Like we gotta like build relations back up. for the most part, from fans throughout like some research, and a lot of Reddit posts, it's like they generally seem to be supportive of Chinese idols and beg agencies to treat them as fair as Korean idols, but there are still biased opinions, which I'll get into in a bit. But the thing is, either way, there's probably going to be a decrease in Chinese idols because China has their own idol industry going on. And so they will want to establish there rather than Korea, along with those who leave the groups as well for a bigger opportunity. So speaking of bigger opportunities, like why exactly are Chinese idols going back to their home country? There's a lot of reasons because of how they're treated, but the biggest is more opportunities like that they will have in their home country rather than in Korea. So research showed that there has been a pattern of Chinese trainees that debut in Korea, but like after a while they go back to China. And some cases can be like mistreatment by the companies themselves, which there's a bunch of stories on that. But the real reason is that China itself as a country has been doing everything they can to advance as fast as possible. And it's kind of like has worked, but they have found new success and more importantly, wealth than ever before, which allows them to attract more talent. So remember the member from Super Junior, since leaving for China, his net worth has multiplied like over like $13 million in US currency. Yeah. And so the same can be said for Chris, Luhan, and Tao. All of them have set up extremely successful careers in China, which good for them. Same for idols that are still managed in Korea but promoting in China. And despite K-pop being so popular, according to the research, the top 1% of Chinese celebrities make 8 times more than those in Korea. So it's like, I mean, better opportunity. It's like, it isn't the only reason that some Chinese to leave, but it's like one of those opportunities. Like if something better opens up, like are they really gonna like pass it up? So, but it's also the thing of like, why don't companies just promote their groups in China? Well, K-pop is banned there because according to the Ministry of Cultural website, no Korean stars have been granted permission to perform there since I think like October, I think. And it isn't just K-pop, like even films, dramas, and performances have been partially prohibited in mainland China for about like 4 years now. And so like even big groups like BTS couldn't, which speaking of them, there was a situation during a speech where one of the members, RM, was receiving an award for promoting US-Korea relationships, and especially since it was like the 70th anniversary of the Korean War. Although he didn't mention China like at all, Chinese internet users like in the media like slammed them, not acknowledging the sacrifices that Chinese soldiers made fighting with North Korea against US and South Korea. So it's just like, why? I didn't mention you. Why you answered yourself? But anyway, so like there was like multiple hashtags like saying like BTS humiliated China and stating if you want to make money in China, you should consider the feelings of Chinese fans, which is understandable. Always consider the feelings of fans, but still. And the band's totally one-sided attitude to the Korean War hurts the feelings of Chinese netizens and negates history. And it got so bad that companies like Samsung, Hyundai, and Fila have begun to like distance themselves from them in China by pulling like ads and different products in an attempt to avoid boycotts of the products from like citizens who were like passionate about the situation. And even like the foreign ministry like spoken on it because it was like that serious. But that's pretty much it. Even though they recently have been taking a few steps back, allowing it a bit more. What's more important is like what do the people think of it like exactly? But it's because if they're interested in it, and if China opens up completely to Korean culture, especially K-pop, it can lead to exploding popularity even more than what it is now, which would be a bigger milestone than recognition here in the US. So yeah, there's also a huge situation on whether or not to support Chinese idols because of what is happening and what has happened. Everyone has the right to boycott any artist over anything, and that is an issue that they personally feel doesn't align with their own morals. Everyone has their own opinion, but there is a lot of discourse on whether or not people should support Chinese idols, especially since some idols I haven't seen any, to be honest, but that's because I kind of like got out of K-pop for like a little bit, so I'm not like up to date on anything, but like some like publicly support Chinese government. this is all from like a large Reddit post that I linked on under differing opinions. It was like super long of like different opinions on what and like different information. If so, if y'all want to like look at it, it don't matter. But one Reddit user stated, "You gotta understand, you supporting these idols is only going to legitimize them and give them the power and money to prop up a regime that is committing genocide. A public support is a support whether or not by their own volition or by their company." So some people will brush it off, but celebrities are very powerful in mainland China, where many of them actually serve on committees formed by the government, which is crazy. So like I said, this is a very long and discussive Reddit post. So if you want to look at it, you can, or I can send a link in Kakao later on if y'all also want to take a look and read it for yourself and form your own opinions. Totally cool. But there was one post on it though stating that all Chinese idols are bad because there's like levels to it. So like the first level is being simply existing as a Chinese person and occasionally posting a picture of the national flag when national days are on or something. It's like you're just like saying, I'm just like, hey, I'm from here. That's it. There's nothing else to it. But there's level 2, which is showing support of the One China policy, of recognizing that Taiwan is part of China and not like its own separate thing. That's like the One China policy is for the most part. I apologize if I'm explaining wrong. Most idols fall into this category, and for any idol to outrightly going against the One China policy or even a slight suggestion that you disagree with it, it's like completely deleting your career. Bye, gone. That's it. And so expecting idols to say otherwise is unrealistic. But there's also the issue with Xu from Twice, which I'll get into a moment. But and then the final level 3, is like actively showing support for the CCP. Yeah, got enough C's. And for its human rights abuses. That's when it becomes like really difficult to support them. Unfortunately, yeah, there are some who have like expressed support for the Hong Kong police brutality, which is like then is like, should I? Do I? I don't think I can. Yeah, so it really all depends on your own personal opinions, and some people feel very strongly about it, others meh, and some really don't know because they might like really like them or the group themselves, and this is just like, but like I can't, like my heart is like right here, but this is saying something else. It's the whole debacle, and y'all just form your own opinions. Unless I place my notes. Oh, there are netizens who want agencies to stop casting Chinese and Japanese people in groups, because there are netizens who have stated online that they rather support like a fully Korean group rather than a mixed group, and are like sick of seeing them. They'll like outwardly make fun of them, like the way that they speak, like either the voice or the pronunciation, or even just because they're Chinese or Japanese or whatever. They will actively like be like, I don't want to support. It's like, why not? But yeah, so for Thai and Taiwanese idols, in total there's 12 Thai, 12 Taiwanese, and 19 of other Asian descent like Vietnamese, Indonesian, Filipino, etc. And there is a very large difference in numbers compared to Chinese. There isn't a solid reason as to why there aren't as many, but one Reddit post, there is a lot of Reddit posts on this. There's a lot. If y'all want to dig through those, go for it. It's an interesting experience. But one said that it's because of the strict beauty standards that South Korea has, which is most likely won't get them accepted by companies, or just the treatment in general. But obviously, if you're talented or you match the beauty standards, you're Gucci. Not all companies though, except foreign trainees like SM, but they usually only look in China, Japan, and sometimes Taiwan. Remember how I mentioned the different levels to like how bad Chinese idols are? This applies to Sue, who had a scandal involving the Taiwanese flag, which this falls under like level 2 that most idols fall under, and caused an uproar and accused her of being a Taiwanese independence activist and profiting from her mainland Chinese fam while having this stance. Because of this uproar and a risk of losing her career, JYP Entertainment made her do an apology video saying, "There's only one China, two sides of the strait are one, and I have always felt proud to be Chinese. I feel extremely apologetic to my company and to internet friends on both sides of the strait for the hurt that I have caused. I also feel very guilty." So yeah, JYP had also made a statement saying that like because she was under 18, for this is like for the apology video, the company sought consent from her parents before the video was filmed, and also stated that an individual's belief is not something that a company can or should force upon another, and that this has never happened. And the reason why this caused such an uproar because I think Monty mentioned it like briefly, like there's mainland China and then there's Taiwan, but the one China policy is including Taiwan in one. So there's like a whole thing of like Taiwan is its own country and it's not part of it. And so it's kind of like she's like an activist for Taiwan's independence and kind of stuff. I'm sorry if I'm explaining wrong. I apologize. A lot of information got confused in my brain. But yeah, and so it caused a lot of uproar on it. And so she had to make an apology, otherwise her career gone. It could be gone like in just a second if she didn't. So in the situation of Thai idols, there are some Koreans in that group foreign workers as Southeast Asians and see them as criminals who cause social problems. Don't know how, don't know why, but they do. There's also the bias of perception just in general that multicultural families are mostly formed through marriage and that these families are like a social minority group that needs to be treated with sympathy, if that makes any sense. So instead of like being happy, like, oh, that's great, that's super cool, they're more like, I'm so sorry, which is, yeah. But the influence of Thai idols in the media, like Lisa from Blackpink, on the perceptions of Korean public is mostly found to be positive. But there was a whole situation itself where there's a little video thing that explains it a little bit. If you just want
Yes. Yet, no matter how much love Lisa receives, the haters are always waiting for their chance to shine. It all started after the 21-year-old singer attended the 33rd Golden Disc Awards in Seoul. She looked stunning in her strapless dress. However, this was the moment the haters decided to strike. Most of the offensive comments centered on her appearance and outfit of choice, but one comment from a South Korean K-pop fan went a step further. They posted on social media writing, "With makeup on, she totally looks like a Russian elf. But with darker hair and no makeup, she looks like an average Thai woman." Ouch! The comments spread like wildfire. Lisa's full name is Lalisa Manaban, and at age 14, she left her home in Bangkok to move to South Korea to pursue her dreams. There, she signed with YG Entertainment and then debuted in 2016. Rightfully, many Thai fans were enraged at the discriminatory remarks, so much so that a Thai television channel covered the controversy, worried that she was facing racism in South Korea.
Oh yeah. So yeah, Bam. So yeah, their Thai fans were like completely like enraged by this because like it's super rude considering that she did go to South Korea super young and like respected the culture and learned about it, and like they need to like give like the same respect back. But Bam Bam from GOT7 also addressed the situation as well and stated that he fully supports Lisa and that it isn't a big deal for her because it was only like 10 people who like agree with the comment, and like there was a lot, the people who loved her already and even after outweighed those who hated her. And he also briefly mentioned in an interview once that it was common for racist attacks on Thai idols, especially during his trainee days, but he just disregards it. He's like, that's not gonna stop me. I'm gonna just keep doing me. And so even after her situation of racial discrimination, many netizens criticized and self-reflected on the racial discrimination in Korea. So this started like a whole lot of stuff on like self-reflecting and everything. Hello? But yeah.
Hello everyone. Okay, I'm back, and this time these are my slides, so I will be covering non-Asian idols as well as biracial idols. So I have a picture for each of the people that are listed. So first is Alex Reed, who is a former member of Rainia. Again, this is another band name that I've heard said quite a few different ways. So if I've just butchered that, I'm terribly sorry. Which is now, as you guys may know, Black Swan, of course, with member changes and everything. She joined in 2015 and then she left in 2017 due to massive mistreatment. And she was the very first K-pop idol of African descent to be full African descent, which was amazing. But in the picture to the right, she is in the middle in the bright blue sequin jacket. One of the weird things was actually, the way that they treated her. I watched one of their performances and she had a rap part at the beginning where all of the dancers moved aside, let her have her time to shine. And then the performance was on TV. They edited out her leaving. So for the rest of the dance, until she came back in at the end, it's just like she wasn't even part of the band. She just wasn't even there. And then when her time came back again, bright walls opened up. She got to like model walk out, and then she got to finish off the dance with them. So it's really odd because it was also stated that when they take pictures, when they do outfits and all that stuff, a lot of times the stylists are putting her in these clothes that really draw attention to her and really make her stand out. But at other times, it's just like she's just not even there. One of the bigger things that made me really quite angry was that they wouldn't get her a translator. I don't know why you would deny someone that, but that just kind of made me furious that you would deny someone a translator. I don't understand that, and I'm just getting frustrated. But all due to all of that and everything, and just the mistreatment in general. I hope that she is doing much better now. And actually, she has a YouTube channel. If you guys do want to hear more of her side, I do know that there's a video out there of her just straight up. The title is just "Why I Left." So if you guys want to know more than what I've just said, she does have a video out there. Chad Future, I'm gonna come back to that son of a gun because I can't. But the next one is Sam Okiri, who is a TV celebrity. He's a Ghanaian South Korean TV celebrity, and he is to the right in the red suit. And there is, I'm not sure how recent this is, but this is the most recent kind of like backlash or like hot water he's been in. So if you can see to the right of the picture of him, there are some Korean school students who have dressed up as the dancing coffin Vine or TikTok that became pretty popular. And I don't have to say it, you can look at the picture and know what's wrong with the picture. And so he posted that on his Instagram. He has also a little bit of a backstory. He's been living in South Korea for quite a while. He's been on many Korean TV shows. He knows the language fully. I want to say that he's maybe been living in Korea for about 7 years. So he's not really new to Korea. And so he had posted this, and part of his, a little part of his paragraph was, "This is no longer tolerable. We can't keep allowing this." And pretty much everyone canceled him for standing up against blackface, which was wildly confusing. So many people made comments saying that he was being too soft, he was letting it get to him too easily. And then another comment, which I kind of feel like maybe it was just people grasping at straws. they talked about how there were how he supposedly, when he posted the picture with the comment, he was using it without the kids' consent because they were like high school kids. But you can see in the picture that they posed for this. They posted this. He didn't take these pictures. So honestly, I feel like they were just grasping at straws. But either way, it was frustrating that for someone who he finally felt like he was like, okay, this is, y'all need to cut it out. Y'all need to cut it out. They decided to try and cancel him for standing up against racism, which is very difficult to wrap your head around. Although I will say it's a bit difficult to root for him because he has made a very questionable decision from his past, which I have yet to see a full, sincere apology from him. There was a TV show that he was on. I'm not sure of the name, but you can easily find a picture if you type in his name, where he is pulling his eyes back in the very offensive manner of trying to look more Asian. And it's honestly, I found it very hard to look at because it just frustrated me. And so when people, I think, because a lot of times when people get into hot water, that leads you into looking into more of their stuff. And so when this happened, people started bringing up his past and they're like, okay, well then explain this photo. And he was trying to tell them, listen, you guys took that out of context. We were trying to do an ugliest face contest, which I don't think helped him at all. Because in what way would you think that in doing an ugliest face contest would doing that action be okay at all? Whether you weren't doing an ugliest face contest, how would that be okay at all? So he did apologize, but it was still like hey, I'm really sorry, but also keep in mind, y'all took that out of context, okay? So that's kind of maybe on y'all. And so that was just kind of, but again, the most recent one is for this picture. And so I'm not sure if he's on any Korean TV shows at the moment or if he will be asked to come back on any soon. So yeah. Chad Future, this bright-haired boy here on the right who frustrates me to no end. This is a very frustrating thing for me to have to research. He is a solo artist, either from the UK or from America. He was previously in what was just stated as an English boy band called Heart to Heart, and who was, I'm not sure the definition of this, they did not give any clarification on it, but who the English boy band Heart to Heart was K-pop styled. I don't know how you make something K-pop styled that's not K-pop, but yeah. So he tried to put his own twist on it when he decided to go solo, and he made up his own thing called a K-pop for what he wanted to call American K-pop, which was basically just him meshing American pop and K-pop together. I don't know what he expected out of that, but he managed to collab with Ravi from VIX and Aaron from Newest. But the problem with him is that he did not try at all to be respectful towards the Korean culture, to even so much as learn the language. It's just a really frustrating thing. And it seems like he's definitely one of those people who saw K-pop as an opportunity for him to get more popular and an opportunity for him to get more money. And it makes me sad that these amazing artists collabed with a kid like this who was just trying to get some money. The song's not even really that good, but that's just my opinion. That's fine. And then we have Lana, who I think some people are still definitely on the rocks about her. I think she's definitely gained a bit more of a following now. I haven't listened to any of her songs. I don't really know that much about her songs. I know that some people in the beginning were quite judgmental about her vocals and her dance performance, but that's about it. I don't really know much more about that, but she has been labeled as K-pop's first Caucasian idol. She is fully Russian, let me take that back. She is a Tatar Russian, which Tatar is an ethnic group which was taken into the when Genghis Khan, there we go. It's kind of it's an umbrella term, kind of. So she actually is the YouTube video that I watched said that she was 1/4 Asian. I don't know where the YouTube video got that number, but they did say that Tatar or Tartar is she can say that she is Asian because she is actually, but she is mostly Russian, and so people still kind of have an issue with that. They a lot of people claim that she's using her white privilege, that she's stealing the spotlight away from Asians, which is what K-pop should be centered towards. K-pop should be centered towards shining that spotlight on Asians so that they can get their time to shine as well. And so people were still kind of really iffy on her. But like I said in the beginning, I think she has definitely gotten more of a bit more of a positive following. I can assume that maybe she's still getting some hate. Oh, she's an idol in China now. Well, good for her then. Okay. Nice. Okay, interesting. Wow. And then, so that's for non-Asian idols. But biracial idols, of course, we have the beautiful Fatou, who is a Senegalese member in Black Swan. She is the main rapper, main dancer, and that's supposed to say and she is also part of the vocal line. She is the second K-pop idol of African descent, which is amazing. I think that she's wonderful. And from what I looked up when looking into her, it seems like everybody is kind of, they are really just wishing her well. So far, I've seen a lot of positive response. Most of people are just like, we love her. She's beautiful. She speaks 5 languages. She's the queen. And we are wishing her the best. In fact, so many people are really wishing her the best. They're just kind of nervous for her because I think a lot of people are ready for when she gets hate to come back those haters. And I'm very ready for that. And I love it. But yes, I'm very excited to see her more and what she does. I love it. Yoon Mi-rae is African-American and Korean. And so her father is African-American, her mother is Korean. She was actually born in Texas, in Fort Hood. So that's great. And she is a rapper. And so I add her in because of Trudy, the winner of Unpretty Rap Star Season 2. Trudy is someone who wants to be a rapper, and she has succeeded in that. But she looked up to Yoon Mi-rae. Yoon Mi-rae was her idol. So we understand, especially as people who stan K-pop idols, we understand that sometimes there are things that you want to copy your idol. Like if your idol buys a sweater and you're like, that's really cute, I would love to have that sweater. You buy that, and BTS comes out with their perfume line, you want to buy their perfume. Trudy copied everything that she should not have copied from Yoon Mi-rae. So Yoon Mi-rae, being African American, she is allowed to wear certain things and certain hairstyles. Trudy is absolutely not. As a full Korean, she cannot, and she did exactly that. I don't know if there's a picture of Trudy out there where she doesn't have cornrows in her hair. And it's almost infuriating to look at. There's the pictures of her, she has crimped her hair to no end to make it look like type C hair, which as a Korean, she does not have. There are very few pictures that I've seen of her with just a regular ponytail. It's just insane. And I feel like it's very unfair that she won Unpretty Rap Star because there's a video of her kind of doing a rap battle with another girl. And forgive me because I'm not, if anybody watches Unpretty Rap Star, I do not. So I don't really know how it works. So I don't know if it was freestyle or if they had time to prepare, but the other girl who was against her talked about how she needs to quit with this act. She needs to lighten up her makeup and she needs to stop. And I thought that it was amazing, because she called her out for doing blackface, and it was my favorite thing. But unfortunately, the judges did not seem to get it, but I was living for it. But yeah, it frustrated me just looking at every single picture of Trudy with the corners in her hair. And it's frustrating. And the picture that she has now, because she's still making music, she is a rapper. She's got like dreads in. And so it's difficult. It's a difficult thing to look at. And so a few more that everybody probably knows: Vernon, Samuel. I wanted to do some information on Samuel, so I'm so sorry, but I could not find a lot of information except for stuff about his dad and then stuff about something with his lawyer and his entertainment. I couldn't really find a background where he kind of dealt with issues of being part Korean and not. And then there was Somi, Hyunin Kai, Kyla, Alex, Leia. And then there's also another one who I did not get to add because I was running out of space. So let me check my notes real fast because I wrote his name out. Kangnam, who is part Japanese and part Korean. Many of these idols have dealt, if they've spoken out about issues with being part Korean and part something else, they mostly had to deal with it in school when they were younger. Somi was dealing with it a lot in school, getting bullied for everything. But Kangnam he's spoken out about how one time at school he was beaten up so badly for being Japanese that they managed to break some of his bones, which is just infuriating to hear, because it makes you so angry to think about other people like Ollie London or people like groups like Kachi, who I feel like for these idols who are getting hate for not being fully Korean, and then for these people to try and like mosey their way in and say that they're part of K-pop so easily like that, it frustrates me and it makes me so mad. It just frustrates me, and I hope that I've gotten everything across to you guys. And again, if you guys want any more information, I know that there's I've watched a ton of YouTube videos. You guys can definitely find a ton of information. But yes, okay. I hope I got everything across well.
No, Tessa, you did a great job. Someone messaged me a while back about, I can't remember who, and I can't open anything because I'm afraid if I touch something, my computer will freak out. But how Chinese celebrities have places in politics. And in China, there is this massive event called Chuan. And it is right around New Year's, and pretty much Chuan is like the Super Bowl of China. And just like a baby reminder that the Chinese ethnic group is the largest ethnic group in the world, and Asians are the majority race on earth. So some people are surprised when Chuan, one of their biggest segments, Chuan just translates to Spring Gala. So it is for New Year's. And one of their most popular segments is this little sort of variety show. And it's an all-day event. 80% of Chinese families watch this show. That is, for context, 800 million people who watch this show every year. So if you are a celebrity, most of the time, these are the people who are highlighted on the Spring Gala. That is like 2 Americas. That's 800 million people just casually watch this. So yes, these people hold a lot of abilities. They hold a lot of an insane platform in their country, and primarily all across Asia. So that is why they have a lot of hands in different things. So maybe a little unfamiliar to us, but now we get into our last topic of the day, which is cultural appropriation. So we'll be doing a brief look at Korea's use and interpretation of foreign cultures, which has already kind of been touched on through looking at xenophobia and the place that foreign idols have in the Korean entertainment industry. But now we'll be looking at their incorporation of foreign cultures in just like more of a daily casual setting, as well as an entertainment media basis. Click. All right. I always just like throwing out a definition because cultural appropriation can be somewhat subjective to an extent, but I still think it is important to just lay down the foundation here. So, definition of cultural appropriation is the unacknowledged or inappropriate adoption of customs, practices, ideas, etc. of one people or society by members of another and typically more dominant people or society. So we got a couple of sexy examples right here, because culture appropriation, it wouldn't be K-pop, it wouldn't be the Korean entertainment industry if it did not feature just a little bit. But so that I do not want to just give it the brush onto Korean media. Like, it is nothing without the adoption of foreign cultures, and there is a reason behind that. So not necessarily coming from an entirely negative place, but we will be sort of dismantling and deconstructing why these things happen and why it can be dangerous. Moving right along. So I want to preface this conversation by asking, with Korea being such a homogenous and nationalistic society, where does cultural appropriation stem from in Korea? So basically, in looking at that question, we have both the duality of a country that is very proud of its origins. Monty did a great job really outlining as to why Korea as a country has been through so much and why they're so prideful, while at the same time, Asia as a whole is extremely homogenistic. So a lot of them follow the same ideas, the same traditions, and it's more so the group ahead of the individual. So when we have these two things, they somewhat contrast, but yet they give a gateway for things like culture appropriation, oddly enough, to occur. So the easy answer to that question would be the increased globalization of Korean culture, thus an outpouring of new foreign media and interaction, have caused what we see now. Alongside the traditional role that American film and TV has played in expanding Western ideology and culture abroad. So if you guys have ever heard, I always like to make a connection back to K-pop because I just feel like it's casual and relatable. But when Namjoon would say, or when like American hosts would be like, so how'd you learn English, Korean man? And he'd be like, well, I watched Friends and I taught myself. Friends, amongst many other, dozens other 90s shows, were available in Korea because subtitles back then were really cheap to do for foreign countries. So Koreans would learn about American society through these TV shows. But going back a bit, how these things play into cultural appropriation, and specifically blackface, is an increasing interest in appealing to foreign/exotic aesthetics. Because what are these things viewed from the standpoint of? Going back to when I'm talking about entertainment, where do Koreans see Black people, Hispanics, Native Americans, Middle Easterners for the first time? By and large through entertainment. So like when we touched on it originally earlier with Korean demographics, there is not a huge role that diversity plays in Korea. So when they see America or any other country as a whole, these are the first times that they're seeing these certain ethnic groups. This is upheld through the presentation of blackface as entertainment or even cosplay. Henry, who was originally supposed to debut in EXO, but then Koreans had so much backlash against the possibility of EXO having a new member that he was just cut from the lineup. And he's been sort of a soloist, sort of not, for about 10 years. Henry, just a couple of years ago, decided to dress up like Nick Fury in full blackface. And Henry is from Canada, born and raised, baby. So when people were like, hey, buddy, looking a little crispy today, he replied that you should not take offense to it because it is cosplay. So from that standpoint, it's also not cosplay, by the way, it's just racist. But from that standpoint, these are ideas that are commonly upheld by older Korean generations that have the most respect in Korean society. There'll be examples further down in the slides, but there are a lot of times where Korean SNL, Korean sitcoms, whenever they show a presentation of Black and brown people, it is them putting on makeup and dressing up in these ethnic cultures like it's a costume. So they see that as, and it's been that way for a long time, so they see that as, it's just a joke. I mean, I have good intentions. I'm just trying to make people laugh. I don't mean any offense by it. So how can it therefore be discriminatory? How can it be racist? And how can you take offense to it? Again, this goes back to reinforce this. This is reinforced by the racist trend of yellowface throughout the early 20th century Hollywood, which again was watched by people abroad. So it's kind of similar to the idea of, in a way, where, how do I put this? If we see early Hollywood and their idea of how Asians look or how stereotypical Asian features are, Hollywood presents that as a costume. Hollywood presents this as a character that they're portraying, that there's quote unquote no ill will, which these are famous movies, which most recently, I think, or most controversial, Ghost in the Shell, was watched by Asians abroad. So that's where I specifically put this picture. Catherine something, forgot her name. I'm a film major, I should know. Hepburn? It's something that sounds famous, that is another name by someone else, but I can't think of it. Anyway, she dressed up like an Asian woman. And this was also during the time of Anna May Wong, who was the first Asian American Hollywood icon. She was declined this role. So Asian Americans seeing this abroad, this sort of reinforces the idea that Westerners are okay with dressing up like another ethnic group for entertainment. Granted, this is from 1920s, 1940s, but I use this as an example to sort of set the stage for as to why this idea of cosplaying as another race is perceived the way it is. So there's also a lack of awareness in global racial diversity. This is basically referring to the experiences of Black and Latino foreigners in Korea, assumed to all be from either Africa or Mexico. So if you ever watch I Love Asian Boss, we've used their videos plenty of times. They'll do street interviews basically being like, ask you questions from a Korean perspective, da 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 da. And a lot of times when Koreans meet or see foreigners, if they're Black, they just assume they're from Africa. If they're white, they assume they're American. And then there's, of course, the assumption that these people wouldn't speak Korean. So because of this and underlying stereotypes, it allows itself to garner a wider idea that this is not something that needs to be changed because it is so ingrained in society, but there is improvements. That all being said, I want to establish a foundation for a few reasons as to why these instances occur. However, the appropriation of Native, Middle Eastern, Black, and Latino culture has been called out and criticized globally for decades, but it's time that we should look at a few examples of Korean celebrities who have ignored these concerns. So now a few famous examples done by Andreas.
Okay, sorry, my internet's like a little lag. So, first we're doing most infamous examples, and I say most infamous, I'm sure these aren't, there's so many, like an unbelievable amount. But first we're going to cover the appropriation of Indian culture. It's kind of been rampant, but only recently has it been like noticed and people are giving actual backlash for it. Girl group Oh My Girl has multiple instances of wearing bindis, mocking Middle East dancing used for comedy. They just, I don't know why, but they have a lot of repeat instances of this. And then Michael, you had the previous picture of 21's Dar also doing this. Yeah, I don't know why they do that, but the result of this has had nothing. Like there's been no consequences because I don't think the backlash is big enough for the company to respond. Yeah. But the next one is blackface, which has been done more by entertainers or idols, which a multitude of groups have been witness using it. So much, like it has happened so many times that quite a lot of them kind of get buried to where you don't really hear about some of them because they were kind of wiped or happened like a long time ago. Some examples are Mamamoo. They've done it, I think, more than once. G-Dragon, Super Junior, multiple members of Super Junior have done it. I think there's that picture of Nick Fury Michael was talking about earlier. And then a lot of comedians, they have like this fictional character that they like to cosplay, quote unquote, as, and a lot of comedians has dressed as him, and it's just like, it's even more offensive than like normal because it is very exaggerated. And the result of all of these is apologies, if any, are nearly always like they minimize the issue. They never say who they're sorry to. They're like, we're sorry to our fans. It's like it's like a very general apology. The next one is there are instances of idols wearing multitudes of African hairstyles, including braids, twists, and dreads. as well as many do-rags used on idols. The examples are so numerous that it would have been easier to point out which group hasn't done this, especially popular groups. It's like extremely rampant, and fortunately, I mean, not fortunately, because it shouldn't be happening to begin with, blackface has kind of been declining a little bit more, but um, thank you, Ashley. But the use of hairstyles has not really been declining as of recent. And SM and YG Entertainment are repeated offenders on this issue. They really have not stopped doing it despite getting so much backlash. And they do have people in their camp that I'm sure are telling them like, don't do it. But I don't know. They should know better. And the results are very mixed because some of them will apologize. We're not also apologizing isn't like something to be praised. I think that it's the bare minimum that should be done. And others purge evidence to where it's kind of deleted and you never really see it again. So they don't say sorry because they're like, well, it's not there anymore. And others kind of mock criticism, like with the Nick Fury thing, to where they're like, oh, like, it's just cosplay. Like, I don't get why you're so sensitive. Or I think someone called out Got7's Jackson for using dreads, and he's like, well, it's not like that. Like, he was kind of like very like dismissive. They kind of do that sometimes because they don't, either through ignorance or stupidity or actual racism, they don't understand why people are offended by it. But the majority of the time, no one says anything at all. So, can I go to the next slide? We just want to see their forehead. It's not there to do. Oh, God. And now I'm going to less infamous examples because I just wanted to cover some that kind of go under the radar and don't really get talked about as often. Because we all know kind of the bigger ones just being in like the K-pop scene or whatever. But girl group Some, pronounced Some, it's kind of close to sounding like something unfortunate. They had a V-Live where they guessed which ethnic heritage they were, comparing based on their features, and they compared like their features to like a Filipino or African or Native American people, and it was just really, really bad looking and in poor taste. Their company did issue an apology quite immediately, which once again should be the bare minimum. And, you know, with how often this happens, even an apology is like it's very hard to come by. So that one's kind of a lesser known thing that happened pretty recently, I think this year or last year, 2020. And then also on an older instance that kind of got buried over time, like I said before, girl group TR released the song "Ya Ya Ya," where they wore Native American headdresses, like the whole attire. It's on their art, it's on the music video, and they put a man on a stake in the music video, alluding to sacrifice or eat him. So I don't really need to explain why that's wrong, but as it was 2010 at the time, there was not enough backlash for anything to be done on the issue, and it just was something that kind of got buried with time. But I think in terms of mocking native culture, that was probably one of the worst ones that has happened. Next one is boy group members Minho from Winner and Bobby from Icon had stereotype being gangsters in like a skit that they did. They like robbed each other and used slang. The N-word was also used in the script. People have debated, but whether or not they did use it or not, it doesn't even matter. Either way, it was extremely offensive. And despite that this happened in 2017, there is yet to be an acknowledgement or apology from either the company or both men. Yeah, that was actually one of the worst ones that I've found, and no one really knows that that happened. So yeah.
So going from there, we're going to sort of get into the topic of anti-Blackness and racism within the K-pop, Korean entertainment media sphere. Primarily, I did want to touch on the concept of Blackness. So when we're looking at K-pop comebacks that may have sort of this edgy, dark comeback, or this edgy, dark aesthetic, I think Big Bang is a repeat offender of this. NCT has gotten a lot of issues this year with the cultural appropriation of Middle Eastern culture. Blackpink had the Hindu god that was placed on the floor, which is extremely disrespectful. A lot of issues, but primarily looking at the concept of how Blackness is used to push a certain aesthetic. Overall, I think primarily we've seen in whenever a group like Icon comes out and they have the hip hop, slang, bad boy type aesthetic, it's interesting that they try to apply themselves more to an American definition of like hood, gangster, which are not synonyms for Black, but these are also large communities that have been built with culture and history and creative ideas, and those people that did that are Black. So why is it that when we have 4 Minute do their comeback crazy, why do hairstylists put Hyuna in braids? Why do they put them in these sort of fake cornrows? Why is Win-Win in, I can't remember, was it the fire truck music video potentially? I was trying to like put all the pictures together, but why is it that companies continuously put Taeyong, whoever, in dreads, braids? Because they want their idols to, for this concept, look more edgy, look more aggressive, look more intimidating. And that is also sort of leaning into this stereotype that Blackness also equates itself with danger and aggression, and that is not safe. So when a lot of fans try to go against this idea of constantly putting idols in certain hairstyles that are not natural to their own culture, it leans itself as well into this idea of that Korean aesthetics as they are not marketable. As we see groups try to enter into the Western market, what is popular here in America? Hip hop, rap, that is the most popular genre of music. So we see more and more idol groups in Korea trying to reach and get into that audience that is the Western Hemisphere. BTS has done it successfully, Blackpink twice. These are groups that have been able to reach that. But I do have a video later on that will sort of tackle this. These are also companies that have, their CEOs have stated that they've built their sounds off Black music. So if we look at the concept that Blackness plays in K-pop as a whole, it's interesting just to see, because if there's the idea that, oh, Koreans can't be edgy, Koreans can't be aggressive, which isn't true. You can meet anyone. There isn't any society or culture that is monolithic. So it's made, I think, me personally, if I'm just speaking on my own opinion, looking at why can't groups just market themselves as what they know, what is familiar to them, Korean ethnic cultures, Korean backgrounds, because that's something to be proud of, spreading that diversity and that culture and that history. And yet they put on, again, the concept of Blackness as a costume because it fits into the aesthetic that they're trying to appeal to, which in of itself is stereotypical and racist, because no community, no ethnic racial community is a costume. So I will show this video that just sort of gets into the Korean perceptions of Black people. And I will skip this video because there's a better one on ahead. But this is basically just getting into Black people that live, work, try to go about their lives and exist in Korea, some of the racism that they've experienced.
혹시 개인적으로 그런 사례를 들어보신 적 있나요?
차별 사례를요?
그냥 길거리만 가다가 흑인분들이라고 막 많이 쳐다보고 막 흑형 얘기하는 거는 좀 많이 들어봤습니다.
흑인들이 직접 당한 거 뉴스 미디어를 통해서 들은 적은 있는데 직접 본 적은 없어.
어떤 얘기를 들으셨어요? 혹시?
흑인 학생분이 영어학원에서 가르치려고 강사로 그 시험을 보러 갔는데 거기서 우리는 백인 아니면 안 받는다 이래서 그런 글을 봤었어요, 뉴스에서.
실제로 군복무 할 때도 주변 상인들이 그런 편견을 대놓고 이렇게 보여주시더라고요.
놀리는 것 같아요. 굉장히 이제 말을 못 알아듣는다고 생각을 하고 이제 뭐 깜둥이 뭐 깜씨 뭐 이런 식으로 피부색으로 이제 기분 나쁘게 계속 조롱하는 거를 가끔 듣거든요.
아, 그래요?
예.
어디서요?
이제 뭐 길거리 다닐 때 뭐 이렇게 흑인분들 지나가면은 뭐 사람들이 이제 얘기하는 게 들리는데 그런 거 가끔씩 듣거든요.
So that just kind of gets into, they touched on a little bit the kamdongi, which is basically the Korean N-word. And that goes back into my point, why would a society that doesn't naturally have just Black people chilling around have this word? Why are slurs created in the space? So we're going to dive a bit more into racism in Korea. Ooh, ooh, ooh. There we go. Oh, wait. Oh, there we go. As we just tackled, because the racism in Korea as an issue is so much deeper. This is barely the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of intersectionality and a lot of complexities within racism, especially as it's seen abroad. But I do want to tackle the idea of Asian infantizing. So a lot of times when Black and Brown fans or people who are just concerned about the things that they're seeing in a culture and an industry that is increasingly trying to be more globalized, when they speak on these issues, these are some of the common response that Koreans don't understand what they're doing. Koreans were never taught. Koreans don't know any better. I, in my opinion, find this extremely offensive, and not just speaking from a Black woman, to Asians and Koreans specifically. People aren't ignorant. People aren't stupid. I feel like this, in a way, saying these things inadvertently tries to placate a Korean audience like they're babies. And that's offensive, basically looking at these individuals like they're not grown, like they're not intelligent, like they're not hardworking and educated. So basically placating them with the idea that, oh, these little babies, they may not just understand, they may be just confused, and which is not true. Korea is one of, if not, I believe, is the most technologically progressive country in the world. They know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly what's going on. And in the video that I'll show next, Kenny JD, who is a YouTuber that studied Korean, lived in Korea for a multitude of years, will get in this a bit more. But Korean companies, whether they're in entertainment or not, do a lot of research on what international news outlets, international social media users are saying about Korean culture, about idol culture. So they have receipts every single year. JYP, SM, Big Hit, they have massive sit downs with the sponsors of the company to basically show their research of what they've seen throughout the years and what the results are coming up for when we mention BTS and when we mention Hispanic fans. How are they responding to this quote unquote product? That's just what natural businesses will do to make sure that their item is profitable. So we'll kind of get into that more. I'll let more educated people speak on it.
Is to have a bit of a conversation about anti-Blackness, particularly among Asians in this context. For those of you that are newer to my channel, you may not be aware that my channel actually started off with me, the very beginning started off with me wanting to use it as a method to learn Korean. The beginning years of this channel literally had nothing to do with beauty. And if you've noticed over the years, I've slowly just been more and more disincentivized from making content that's heavily focused on Korea. And I don't know if I've ever explicitly said this is a big part of why, but hello, this is a big part of why. I got to the point where I was no longer interested in placating myself to make those that cosplay Blackness comfortable. This like Black alter ego shit is very prominent in Asian circles. So I mean non-Black circles in general, but I'm speaking from this particular context. So I've met a lot of people who like to put on Blackness as a sort of aggressive, sassy, often violent, combative, angry alter ego. A caricature, a costume. On the weekdays, I'm a banker, and on the weekends, I'm a nigga. Asian communities, particularly ones abroad, so outside of the United States, get away with it. As a person that did spend a lot of time in these spaces, I've heard the rhetoric claiming ignorance amongst Asians. You know, it's not meant to be racist. They just don't know any better, which I find incredibly belittling to both Black people and Asians. They're not children. They're not stupid. You go to any club in Korea that's playing hip hop music and let the N-word drop. Make eye contact with somebody as a Black person
and watch the fear. Watch the quick, I didn't say anything. I didn't say it. I didn't say it. I wouldn't say it. I feel like it's incredibly offensive to both Black people and Asians to sit there and act like people are mindlessly anti-Black. People here and abroad are consciously anti-Black every day.
In Korea, they literally call Black hairstyles like braids, cornrows, and dreadlocks, which I'll be referring to as locks, reggae mori. Mori is the word for hair in Korean, with the whole phrase translating to reggae hair. Reggae, as in the music genre that originated from Jamaica and was popularized by Black artists like Bob Marley. Korea was introduced to Black hairstyles through reggae music, which is why they refer to all these different hairstyles as reggae mori. Nothing to do with the Vikings or their random ancestors. Furthermore, hairstylists in Korea that specialize in these reggae mori looks literally refer to themselves as African American hairstylists. Everyone in Korea clearly credits these hairstyles to Black people, so there's no reason for you to be bending over backwards, grasping for straws to try and speak over Black people when we talk about appropriation. I repeat, these K-pop idols are not doing the hairstyles of Vikings nor their ancestors. They are consciously recreating the hairstyles of Black people. It's literally called an Afro perm. Afro as in African. If you need to understand why appropriation of Black hairstyles is an issue, I have a full video explaining it, which I will link in the description box below. Furthermore, there is currently a law being pushed that would prohibit discrimination based on hairstyle or hair texture called the Crown Act. If you live in America, please contact your senators to help this law pass. I will link resources below. Number 3. Saying K-pop idols do not understand the concept of discrimination because they live in Korea is largely obtuse. In May of 2015, K-pop group EXID arrived at LAX, the international airport in Los Angeles, California. A reporter from TMZ, while covering the story, mimicked one of the members' accents.
It was a crazy K-pop invasion at LAX. This video is insanity. So you have so many people just lined up waiting like at the baggage claim for this girl group called XID. I'm so happy today, whether if it was a British girl, I would do a British accent.
This received huge backlash from Korea, with even the CEO of the group's label making a statement. He called TMZ out for being racist and even threatened legal action. This issue was such a big deal, it was broadcasted by multiple Korean media outlets such as JCBC and Arirang TV. The members of EXID even did a skit about it on Korean SNL.
기분이 지금 어때?
From this situation, it's very clear that Korea understands why it's racist to mock people's accents. So I find it hard to give the benefit of the doubt when they do the exact same thing to Black people during variety shows when they have idols speak what they call Black English, doing bad imitations of how they think Black people talk and act, further stereotyping and disrespecting us. When white people do it to them, it's a problem, but when they do the exact same thing to Black people, we're supposed to just take it. And when we voice how it's hurtful, we are called oversensitive and hateful. What a disgustingly hypocritical double standard. Furthermore, when it comes to the N-word, Korea knows the word is a bad word that they shouldn't be saying. In July of 2014, on Korean rap competition TV show Show Me the Money, the second episode of their third season aired. Mind you, this show is extremely popular in Korea and has debuted some of your favorite idol rappers such as B.I. and Bobby of Icon. One of the contestants said the N-word. I want you to watch the judges' reactions.
Woo! Busan! Busan, nigga! Busan, nigga!
어떠세요? 긴장 많이 되세요? 어떠세요? 긴장 많이 되세요?
You see how two of the judges were shook, mouth wide open and everything, and that other judge asked him if he was nervous? The judges wouldn't have reacted that way if they saw the N-word as a non-issue. In July of 2016, while on a V Live broadcast, K-pop idol Lee Hai said the N-word while singing along to a Rihanna song. She immediately after saying the N-word said, "Oops, should I not have said it?" It's obvious that all of these idols are aware that the N-word is a word they should not be using, but because they face little to no consequence for it, they truly just don't care. Number 4. Yes, these companies know exactly how I feel about these issues. In December of last year, Big Hit Entertainment sponsored a conference titled K-pop Beyond BTS. At this seminar, multiple people presented their research on different topics that concern K-pop and BTS's global success. One of the academic papers presented focused on how Black female fans of BTS engage in discourse about cultural appropriation. In this over 100-page long paper, tweets with less than 300 engagements are cited from as far back as 2018, with even Tumblr blogs included. So yes, we are being watched, studied, dissected. These companies know exactly how we feel. They just don't care. If Irene from Red Velvet could talk down to her stylist so bad that it made them cry, I'm sure your fave can refuse some cornrows. And lastly, number 5, a recap from my past videos. K-pop is built off of Black culture. Just like Lee Soo-min, founder of SM Entertainment, said in an interview, South Korea has best consumed Black music in Asia. Just as J-pop was built on rock, we made K-pop based on Black music. JYP has said the same about his label, along with Bang PD, who has said the same for BTS. The least they can do while they profit off of our culture every day is give us basic human respect. So let's begin.
Bro, when I say I love this channel, this video is 40 minutes. Okay, but that just like consolidates literally all of my feelings. Before I get into let Addie take over to close us out, it is important to realize that if a company is trying to push a global artist, it is important that they're sensitive to a global audience. You cannot, it is hypocritical to not be aware or to not care about cultural issues, especially if you profit off of it. And just to be aware in the future, if anyone tells you that these things that they don't know about it or they have no control over it, Kai, many EXO members, for a great example, most of the time ask for the braids that go in their hair. They ask their stylist to get these styles. She covers it in this video. So hold people, even in American society, especially in American society, you have to hold people accountable. Because as we progress, especially as Korea as a whole becomes more globalized, there's only going to be more instances of this. And your faves ain't coming over here if they looking like this because folks ain't going to be down with it. So moving right along.
Hey, so we just spent quite a bit of time talking about cultural appropriation. So I kind of wanted to give like basically the opposite of it, which is cultural appreciation. And linked like next to it is a video explaining the difference from the perspective of like people who have seen it or experienced it themselves on both ends. While cultural appropriation is like taking an aspect from a culture that isn't yours and like using it for personal interest or aesthetic or just to achieve a certain like image. Cultural appreciation is when someone seeks to understand and learn about another culture in an effort to broaden their perspective and connect with others cross-culturally. So yeah, and they'll explain that a little bit more in the video.
I would describe cultural appropriation as taking something that has cultural, spiritual significance and stealing from it.
Cultural appropriation to me is when you make it a costume.
and it's not coming from an authentic, genuine place.
Something from a culture is being used without proper reference.
Cultural appropriation in my own culture, being a black woman, my hair was definitely quite a hot topic. It only took people or celebrities of a certain colour to make these hairstyles almost seem respectable or seems trendy. That for me was kind of like an insult.
There was a phase where everyone wore keffiyehs, not really realising what a keffiyeh was in any way, which is like a traditional like Palestinian scarf, associations with like political alliance, and it became like a wider fashion thing.
When I see artists diving into Chinese culture and they're kind of using it in a way where, is this anything to do with your narrative? Is this just merely an accessory, a trend to your work? That's when I feel it's getting a bit inappropriate.
You can't just like pick and choose what you think is cool from their cultures and use it to make money.
Call out culture is a bit crazy, so if you're not careful, you might get caught slipping.
Cultural appreciation is when you actually like work with the people from the culture that you're like taking something from.
I'm inspired by this and I also want to contribute to this culture as well.
The type of model high fashion brands use in their campaigns indicate who their target market is.
If you're very like inspired by, say, Moroccan culture, put a North African model in your clothes.
Good example of somebody doing it right is Fenty. Bella Hadid came out in like a yellow lingerie, but there was like a headdress kind of reminiscent of a hijab. The fact that she used a Palestinian model reflects the lack of backlash.
There are already so many people doing whatever you want to do, and they will do it 10 times better than you can.
Big fashion brands can avoid having these types of backlash when they get people from the culture to consult.
I don't feel like there's actual need for another person that isn't part of my culture to now go and represent. Just let the people that are actually of the culture talk.
It'd be so easy for brands to give these people like a platform and a voice and say, we really appreciate your artisanal skills, like hire them to make your garments.
So if you've taken inspiration from a certain culture, make sure that everyone knows the story of where it came from, how it came about.
A small interview, just giving credit towards that, I think makes the whole difference. What I feel like makes people so angry when, you know, you're not really acknowledging what its actual roots are.
How did you make this a space that is more about them as well? Because a culture doesn't exist without its people.
I would describe cultural appropriation.
Hey, so yeah, as they were saying, they mostly used examples from like the fashion industry, but I feel like a lot relates to the music industry as well. Like how the mentioning of like a K-pop rubs you the wrong way because you know that that person is only doing it for their personal gain, or like an idol wearing braids is like rubs you the wrong way too, because you know like they're not doing it to appreciate that, even if they were, that's a whole other subject thing, but they're not doing it to appreciate that type of culture. They're doing it to achieve a certain look or to look a certain way, to portray a certain image. But yeah, an example of cultural appreciation is what we're doing right now. We're appreciating Korean culture by learning about it and just covering, let's say, more than just K-pop and focusing on K-pop. We're doing all of this, the meeting, for the purpose of learning, which is cultural appreciation. Yeah.
So I don't know if Tess, I think I accidentally asked you to unmute, ignore that, you're Gucci. I don't know if we necessarily have time for the activity. Let's see. Well, I guess we can really just open it up if people have like general thoughts. Or Ashlyn, did you want to lead this? I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good. I just actually I have to apologize because I think I have to leave like really soon, like at 4:05, I think.
No, you're fine. Me too.
Cool, yeah.
So I think more than anything though, what we want to do is make sure that this is an open discussion. So if you guys do have any thoughts, of course, you could put that in the main chat because it would be great to just like have a greater discussion with people who couldn't make the meeting. So 10 out of 10 on that.
We may ask these questions in the following meeting just to get to you all's feelings, maybe give y'all some time to simmer. But continuing on, more than anything, thank you guys for joining. More than anything, we don't want to end this off like this is a negative thing. We began this meeting with people who have actually lived in Korea, basically saying they have very minimal instances. By and large, they've had really positive times in Korea. They're proud of the country that they were able to spend some time in. And we wouldn't be the Korean Culture Club if we hated Korea. Every country has its issues. Lord knows we know America does. But we still wanted to take some time to maybe do something different for KCC, delve into a little bit more deeper topics. So we appreciate you guys for coming.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Bye, guys. Have a good day.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
Stop sharing.